The Dada movement formed in reaction to the devastation of World War I. It was an international movement with Dada groups in New York, Berlin, Paris, Barcelona, Rome. The name was arrived at by mere chance or gibberish. There's all sorts of different stories, but I think the main idea here is that Dada valued irrationality and the insanity. Anybody who lived through World War I would have that feeling of a world that can create this kind of suffering and destruction is not a rational place. And Dada really embraced that. Of course, it's needless to say that the Dada artists, because of their experience, became stridently anti-war. Here we're looking at a picture from the first International Dada exhibition that was held in Berlin in 1920. And if you notice in the photographs, the work here is, the way it's displayed really violates the kind of reverential treatment that art usually gets in a gallery or a museum. We see work that's hung over each other, kind of hung haphazardly. There's an installation suspended from the ceiling. There is an attack not just on German nationalism and chauvinism that brought about the militarism and violence of World War I, but there's also an attack on art as an institution. In fact, this sign here says, "Art is dead. Long live the new machine art of Tatlin," referencing the contemporary Russian avant-gardes. Or this sign says, "Take Dada seriously, it's worth it," in this kind of tongue-in-cheek method. Here's one piece from the International Dada exhibition that is a photo montage, bits of photo montage and collage, actually. And collage and montage are great mediums to critique authority and gender roles in society for Hannah Herch. During World War I, she was one of the millions of women who had new employment opportunities as men left to go fight on the front. And she worked for an illustrated women's journal that spoke to this new group of women. In fact, we talk about flapper girls of the Roaring Twenties. In German, they were referred to as the new women. And these ads that we are all very familiar with today told women what to wear, how to fix their hair, how to act, and Herch became an avant-garde artist to critique those images of women. And so what we see here, this is a really complicated montage, but we see images taken from those popular magazines and then cut up and rearranged. We see people from government, we see famous actors and dancers, we have technical objects that are divorced from their functions, we have the heads of Karl Marx and Lenin. Oh boy, I'm putting myself on the spot. Here's Karl Marx, writer of the Communist Manifesto, Lenin next to him, and we have this dancer here in the center who is juggling the head of none other than Käthe Kollwitz. Remember, she's one of the German expressionists we talked about last week, and she broke through a number of barriers for women in the arts in Germany. She became a professor at the National Art Academy in Berlin. We also see down below here in the corner a map of Europe and states where women have earned the right to vote. You see in white, and Germany was added to that list of countries in the year 1919. Marcel Duchamp's Fountain is another Dada work that explores ways of depersonalizing the art-making process. Duchamp talked about searching for the beauty of indifference. And this work is what is known as a ready-made. Duchamp found a urinal in a dumpster. He displayed that urinal on its side, up on a pedestal as a sculpture might be displayed, and signed it R. Mutt, 1917. The concept of the ready-made means that it's not about the touch of the artist, the chisel marks, the paintbrush, the use of a camera, but it's about an artist declaring something to be a work of art. This concept was radical and controversial in 1917, and it is still very controversial in mainstream society today. It really pushes our notion of what art is and how we need to define art. For those of you who speak French, say these letters in French out loud. It might sound a little bit like the sentence in French, "She has a hot ass." This is as anti-art, anti-establishment as you can get, because Marcel Duchamp is showing us a print of one of the most iconic works of art, Leonardo's Mona Lisa. He drew a mustache and goatee on her, and then added that acronym that, when spoken out loud, is a little bit sexually harassing for the Mona Lisa here. This is exactly the kind of boundary pushing, the kind of controversy stirring actions that the Dada artists were interested in. Surrealism is an outgrowth of the Dada movement. Many artists who were Dada artists then turned to Surrealism. Surrealism began as a literary movement. There are Surrealist poets and authors, and the goal was to bring together the thinking of Freud and Marx, two great, primarily 19th century thinkers. And for Freud, he of course called for a revolution in psychology, how we think of the brain, how we think of how we think of ourselves. And of course, Karl Marx was the thinker who called for a revolution in politics and economics, and how we share wealth and how we govern each other. So Surrealism is based on notions of liberation and revolution. Surrealists and Dada artists both sympathized with anarchists, both had an interest in Marx and Freud and bringing their work into visual culture, and both waged attacks on the primacy of vision. They both wanted to subvert the visual experience in art, and we'll take a look at some examples of how that comes to be. Salvador Dali is one of the most famous Surrealist artists, and André Breton, who is the founder of the Surrealist movement, he's a poet who wrote their manifesto. Breton said that with Dali, quote, "the doors of the unconscious have been opened wide for the first time." What's interesting in Surrealist work is that they're not really, their goal is not abstraction. We see a very illusionistic, almost academic setting here with the illusion of depth, the careful modeling of objects, but there's no coherent subject matter. There's all of these images of decay too, the kind of oozing, melting face, the melting watches. One watch here in the foreground is covered and being consumed by ants. Dali and the other Surrealists, they wanted to make the dream world as real as so-called rational reality. And so I think that's why Dali does not go towards abstraction, but gives us this kind of naturalistic illusionism. I love this work. We see an image of a pipe, and underneath it says, "This is not a pipe." I mean, what does that mean? And then the title says, "The Treachery of Images." How are we supposed to understand this? At first, the meaning might be clear. That, well, this isn't a real pipe, this is a painting of a pipe. But I think there's another step. We can go even further here to think about how if the words instead read, "This is a pipe," then they could mean, well, this picture represents a pipe. But, it depends on what we mean by pipe. Do we mean the actual object? Do we mean the image of a pipe that we conjure in our mind? Do we mean a representation of a pipe? Well, and what does that word even mean? Why do we call this thing a pipe? There's all sorts of questions, and I think that exactly is the goal of Magritte, because he creates this paradox for us out of the conventional notion that objects correspond to words and images. That relationship between word and image is often more complex than we might initially assume. This title, Object, Luncheon, Infer, refers back to a seminal 19th century painting by a French avant-garde artist. And if you know what Luncheon, Infer might refer to, please send me an email and tell me who the artist is, the artwork, and the date, and I will give you 5 points of extra credit. In the field of psychoanalysis, in Freud's field of psychology, any sort of empty vessel that can hold something, such as a cup, symbolizes female sex organs. In the field of psychoanalysis, any image, say from your dreams, that's long and pointy, symbolizes the male sex organ. And so here we see an empty vessel and a phallic pointy object next to it, sitting on a saucer completely covered in fur. Oppenheim is giving us very mundane, everyday objects, but she's turning it into an erotic experience. And she's trying to tap in to those unexpressed, festering, lingering, repressed sexual desires that Freud wants us all to explore. It ultimately becomes a fetish object, and Freud is the first to theorize this notion of a fetish object, and we see Oppenheim giving that physical shape in this work.